Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, 2023 has been another challenging season in states like Kansas and Missouri that faced widespread drought. But for pockets, farmers are pleasantly surprised. Michelle Rook kicks off our I-80 Harvest Tour this weekend.
While widespread drought plagued much of the state of Kansas again this year, there were a few notable exceptions, including here in the Northeast.
Ken and Brad McCulley feel very fortunate this season. In a year where nearly 70% of Kansas is under D1 to D4 drought, they're seeing the results of some timely rains.
We had a dry spell early, like in June, and the end of June into July, we had 5 inches of rain in June, 5 inches in July, and then not quite 5 in August.
However, they say they're the exception, and you don't have to go very far before the drought and heat are evident.
It's pretty close to ideal right here, but west and south of us, it's not near that well off. They're really hurting for moisture. The pattern's changed a little bit, but right now it's gone back to they're dry in central and northwest Kansas.
As the combines roll through McCulley's fields, they're not finding the corn they did last year, but still are above APH, so they're pleased.
We started on some of our better ground, and the yields were 220, 230, even a little better than that in places. And we went to some of our worst ground and still hitting the close to 200 mark in places.
And while the drought has cut statewide corn yields in Kansas again this year, the average may be above 2022.
I don't think it'll be down from last year, because last year was pretty low. We were down in the 500 million bushel, and I think we'll be up in closer to 6 maybe.
He says they did find some tar spot in the corn, but it came so late it may not have hurt yields or test weights, which are running 58 to 60 pounds. And the corn won't need much drying as maturity was pushed by the heat.
Our moisture level in the corn right now is 17 to 19%.
The McCulleys are a couple of weeks away from combining soybeans, but they're not expecting bumper yields.
I see soybean yields kind of like corn, not as on the top end as last year, but we're going to have 70 plus.
Disease pressure played a role, but so did the weather.
When that sudden death hit, those fields are going to be short, because we've had it before, and it really hurts your yield. In August, when it got so hot for 10 days, ridiculously hot, and I think that took some yield out of the beans.
In northwest Missouri, Brian Kagi is also finding some pleasant surprises this harvest. He says they started off dry just like the rest of the state and got the crop planted ahead of normal.
We had enough soil moisture to get the crop off to a really good start, but it was really dry, and it just kind of hung on through those first few months of the season.
The pattern continued mostly dry in his area with just some scattered rain, so their subsoil moisture has been depleted, but he's better off than most with over half of Missouri in D1 to D4 level drought.
I pulled up the drought monitor map this morning, and there's a little bitty white yellow spot that's right around us, and it's just surrounded by red severe drought areas. So really fortunate to have caught the rain we did.
So somehow they're getting above average corn yields on their farm.
You know, our corn has been anywhere from 210 to 240, which, like I said, is probably 20 or 30% above normal, and you know, on track to be one of our best years ever.
They were also fortunate to have very little tip back from the heat, and stock integrity is solid. The one caveat is heat stress pushed the crop during filling, and so the corn is a bit lighter. The
test weights of the corn we've sold so far have been kind of on that average, what you'd expect for corn, that 56 to 60. Not as high as we had hoped.
And this was the first year they've seen tar spot, which crept in late season.
I don't think it set in early enough to do a lot of yield damage, but it's certainly going to be something we have to look at going forward for management.
While corn harvest is nearly 2/3 done on their farm, it may be a few weeks before they start on soybeans, and expectations are tempered by that dry August weather.
I hate to make a prediction, but I would hope mid 50 to 60, which would still be a really good average for us.
Plus, he says soybean disease pressure was significant.
We have seen a lot of sudden death pressure that came in that early August time frame. We had all that moisture, beans were planted very early, and We definitely saw, I think there'll be some pockets that have some substantial yield loss from sudden death.
In both Kansas and Missouri, farmers are glad to have another drought year in the rearview mirror and hope the weather pattern finally changes as they move into 2024. I'm Michelle Rook for U.S. Farm Report.
Thanks, Michelle. And she'll actually be back later in the show to talk about improving your soil health and how it begins at harvest. But first, Brazil is a concern not only for crops and competitiveness on the export market, but also beef. We'll tell you why with Don Close and Arlen Suderman next.
The I-80 Harvest Tour on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Case IH. The Farmall has been an iconic partner on the farm for generations. Come celebrate a century of Farmall, the one for all, with us at farmall100.com. And by AGI. At AGI, we spend a lot of time focused on product details, making sure you can store your grain how you need to and move it when you need to. Learn more at aggrowth.com.